How data manipulation language statements are written in a PLSQL block. The most common data manipulation language statements are insert, update, and delete. I'll also show you how to write transaction control language statements, commit and rollback. I have SQL Star Plus open and I'm connected as the user HR. To make this tutorial simple, I'll create a table called T1 consisting of 3 columns. So here's the create table command, create table T1, open parentheses, C1 number, C2 varchar 2 of 10, C3 date. I'm now going to write a PLSQL block that is going to add a number of rows into the table. I'm going to edit a file. I have EDA. It tells me that the file is not found. Do I want to create it? I'm going to say yes. Now, in order for the font to be a little bit larger, I'm going to increase it to size 16. This is not something you need to do, but I've come across a number of comments telling me that the font size is a little bit small on my video, so I've increased it to size 16. Now, inside the editor, in a file called A, I'm going to write a PLSQL block which has a declaration section, which would mean I'm declaring some variables. So here's a PLSQL block that has a declaration section declaring 2 variables A and D. A is a numeric variable that has an initial value of 2. D is a date variable that holds an initial value of sysdate. In the body of the PLSQL block, there are 3 insert statements. The first 2 insert statements pass values for all the columns explicitly. Now the first insert statement is insert into T1 values 1, ZZ, 29th of April 1968. The second insert statement is insert into T1 values open parentheses. Over here I've mentioned A. Now A is the memory variable that was declared holding the value 2. When I reference a memory variable inside an insert statement in a PLSQL block, the value contained in the variable will be put into the table, followed by the value YY, followed by 20th of November 1997. The third insert statement passes values only for 2 columns, the columns being C1 and C3, and the values being passed for these columns are D, and again I'm referencing a memory variable, which is the variable called D that holds the current date. So after this particular block is executed, there should be 3 rows in the table. I've got a PLSQL procedure successfully completed. Let's have a look at the data in the table. So here are my 3 rows. The first row 1, ZZ 29th of April 1968. The second row where I had referenced the memory variable to take, and the value contained in the memory variable is what was stored in the table, 2YY 20th of November 1997. The third row where I had passed values only for 2 of the columns. So notice that one of the columns is automatically taking a null value. This was the column that I had chosen to omit in the insert statement. So here the values are 3, null, and then the value that was contained in the memory variable called D. the value that was contained was today's date, which shows up as the 7th of March 2011. So I just showed you how to write a PLSQL block in which a number of insert statements were written. I'm going to edit the program or the file that was created earlier called A, and I'm going to make some changes to it so that I can show you how an update statement is written inside a PLSQL block. Here in this PLSQL block, I'm declaring a variable called ND, which is of date type, set to an initial value of the 2nd of Feb 1972. I have two update statements in the body of the program. Both the update statements are going to affect the row where the C1 column is taking the value 3. The first update statement changes the column C2 to take a new value of AA. Now, earlier this particular column is taking a null value. That's because I had chosen to omit the value when I was inserting the row into the table, so the null value should disappear and instead you should see the value AA. The second update statement is setting the column C3, which was set to today's date, to take the value that's contained in the memory variable called ND. So instead of today's date, you should see 2nd of Feb 1997. Once again, for the column which is where the C1 column is taking the value 3. It tells me once again that this procedure successfully completed. Let me re-query the table. Look at the data in the table. Here all the changes that I had done through the updates were only affecting the third row. So earlier the row was the row took a null value for C2. Now it's taking the value AA because of the first update. Earlier the column C3 for the row where C1 equals null was taking the system date, which is today's date, and because of the update it now takes the value which was contained in the memory variable, which is 2nd of Feb 1972. So I just showed you how to write update statements inside a PLSQL block. I'm going to edit my file called A once again so that I can show you how to write delete statements inside a block. So here is a declaration section declaring a variable called RM that is of number type, taking an initial value of 3. The body of the program has two delete statements. The first delete statement is affecting the row where C1 is taking the value 2. This was the second row in the table. So with this delete statement, the second row in the table should disappear. Then you have a delete statement where I'm referencing C1 equal to RM. RM is taking the value 3, so it's deleting the row where C1 is equal to 3. So the third row in the table should be deleted as far as with this delete statement. So it tells me PLSQL procedure successfully completed. After the two deletes, I should have only one row in the table, which is the first row. So here we have our row where we have C1 taking the value 1. I've made a number of changes to the table T1 with all of the PLSQL blocks that I have executed. All the statements or the DML statements that were executed through the different blocks were all part of the same transaction. Now when you want to indicate that you want to make the changes made by a transaction permanent, the statement to use would be a commit statement, and the statement to indicate that you want to undo the changes is a rollback statement. Now I'm going to edit A once again, and I'm going to put in a commit, this is then going to be followed by an insert statement where I'll insert into T1 values 55, DD, and let's say today's date. This is then going to be followed by a rollback, followed by an end /. Now this commit statement, which is the first statement in the body, is going to commit the ongoing transaction. Now the ongoing transaction is the one that I have been working with, performing all those inserts, updates, and deletes. Now after all of those changes were completed, the only row that is really in the table is the row where C1 was taking the value 1, and that is the one that is going to be made permanent in the database. Now this is followed by another insert statement. Now as soon as the commit is completed, Oracle is going to start another transaction. Now the new transaction that begins will consist of this insert statement where a row is being inserted. However, the change will not be made permanent. The change is actually happening in memory, and it's only when you tell Oracle that you want to make a change permanent that the change is written to disk. Now this transaction consists of only one statement, and what I have done is followed it with a rollback, which would mean that the ongoing transaction will be rolled back, the ongoing transaction being this insert statement, which is inside this block. So what would happen is after this block completes, the only thing that you should see in the table is the first row, because that is the row that was committed. Even though this row was inserted, it was undone because of the rollback.